subjectivity. All you have is feelings. And of course you would say that you're a straight white old man, you're renowned in your bigotry. All you're trying to do is impose yourself on me. You bastard. What if there is a reality? So this is the thing. Not only, if that is true, not only is free speech not possible anymore, but relationship is not possible anymore. There's nothing that combines us anymore, nothing that we hold in common. We all stand as islands in the sea. It is a desperately tragic way to view the world. And that's why we must understand it, we must be able to call it out. Ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. I'm a politician. I'm a Taupo District Councillor. And I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And
You don't look like it.
And actually, funny enough, we were talking about it. We've just come from Hamilton today, and we were talking about that coming on the journey, which was very wet and miserable, and saying that we grew up in a world where we were used to our families debating politics. I can remember my parents taking me up to Albert Park to listen to people on soapboxes. Dennis and I have been to Hyde Park and listened to the
Speaker's Corner.
And engage with those people there and have discussions with them, and with no meeting of the minds whatsoever, but that's absolutely fine, because you can still, sometimes they knew more about my world than I actually know about it myself, which was very interesting. But as a politician, I struggle with those, you actually just defined it right then and there, I struggle with those people who feel that the right to insult me and attack me somehow promotes the view that they want to promote towards me. I'm only too happy to hear any view, to receive any letter, any email, any telephone call, any Facebook post. I'm anonymous on Twitter, so that one. But when they decide that I'm wrong and I'm a bad person because I think in a different way to what they think, that's the part, as a politician, I don't then want to respond to that person, and generally I just block and delete, because what else?
As is your right.
Yeah, what else can I do when you attack me as a person?
Yeah.
Because I'm there to represent you, I'm there to support you, I'm there to listen to your ideas, and people can, of course, have really interesting ideas that I've never thought about before, but I can't cope with this personal abuse and attack.
I think that's a really important comment. Can I use an example that might make some in this room uncomfortable? Are we okay with it? This is a safe space, everybody. The Free Speech Union has consistently and unwaveringly defended the right for drag queens to read books in libraries. That's been unpopular from some of our people, and you don't get to pick and choose who gets free speech. So do you defend the right for your opponents to speak or not? Now this was a conversation that I had with some councillors yesterday. That I am a Christian, some of you know that. I have children. I would never let my children go to a library and have a drag queen story time. I would very happily join a picket line, counter-protesting them. But, two things. Many people in our country think that the ideas that I have about God and the nonsense that I believe in is harmful to my children. They would very happily see the state stop me from sharing those opinions. Bugger the day, the state intervenes in the way I convey my values and my worldview to my children. So why on earth do I think I can intervene and stop someone, even though I disagree with them profoundly, from communicating their values and their beliefs to their children? The second thing is the counterproductive narrative of censorship. Do you really think that by stopping a drag queen story time from going ahead in the library, that these people suddenly give up on their ideas of gender and inclusivity? Of course not. In fact, all you do is confirm their narrative that the world is patriarchal and cis-normative and it's white people out to oppress them, and that their young trans child or young gay child or whatever it is has the world against them, and that they need to cover them in cotton wool. All you do is confirm every lie that I think they believe in. I was asked, what should we do instead? You know, what I'd much rather do is join a picket line and see the people that go in there to expose their children to these perspectives, and note who takes their children in there. Not to throw a brick through their window, to go up to them in the supermarket one day and say, can I buy you a drink? Can we have a meal together? Can we have a conversation about where we disagree? And you know what? I bet you these people have never spoken to others who disagree with them on these issues. And I'm going to come to the point that you're raising there. What I see defines this conversation is not an exploration about whether these are speech rights or whether it is appropriate for the state to intervene on these instances. What I see is a bunch of name calling. That anyone who would attend these events are groomers and pedophiles. And I don't think that's appropriate, because you can disagree with them, but that doesn't make them malicious people. You can disagree profoundly with their ideas, but I believe they love their children. It's an incredible, incredible thing to accuse parents of hating their children. And you may consider what their love is hate. But the way you challenge that is through counter-speech, not through hatred itself, not through nastiness online. And so I have no time for those opinions, but I will defend the right for my opponents to speak. And I would really appreciate it if supporters of the Free Speech Union took a slightly more principled perspective on this and stopped being so nasty, because it does our cause no good.
But look what happened to Posey Parker.
Look what happened. It's condemnable, and we will come out and condemn that every time. 25,000 people signed our public letter that we took to the police commissioner in 72 hours, and the police commissioner admitted they got it wrong. So of course they got it wrong, but two wrongs don't make a right. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Back over in this corner. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so a question about social media. Okay, you've spoken about the marketplace of ideas and the idea that free speech exists because, or a value of free speech is it allows good ideas to rise to the top through the marketplace. Social media today, different perhaps to when, let's say, Facebook started, chooses what people see. It creates silos where people see ideas that they're more likely to
agree with, and be provoked by,
So my question here is, how does that fit with the concept of freedom of speech if there's no marketplace?
Very, very, very important question, and it is effectively, it's a form of monopoly over the ideas that have been exchanged. It's siloing them all together. There are 3 A's. Again, I told you I was a sucker for alliteration. So when our team started to develop our perspective on this, we had to make them all A's. And so there are 3 A's that we keep in mind when this comes into play. Amplification, algorithms, and anonymity. Amplification. You can go out there, and we do this, we buy an audience. We pay money to have ideas put in front of you. That's quite different from the process of the marketplace of ideas, having good ideas float to the top, right? So we need to have more transparency around the way amplification is being used. And actually a lot of that does already exist. You can see who is putting money into the debate and see how they're manipulating that. Algorithms. In the 1920s, the stock market in the US made many people fabulously wealthy until 1929. And then a lot of people were made fabulously poor. And that's because there was no oversight to the way stocks were being exchanged, and the Security Exchange Commission emerged out of that. What we think is that actually algorithms are the secret source of social media companies. There's no way you can realistically expect them to publicly put out their algorithms. And that's not even really how algorithms work. They're ever changing and learning and developing. That's what AI will certainly take us into as well. But there should be someone overviewing how they're being manipulated. And actually, I think there is a role to say, you don't just ram everyone who thinks in the same way together. You need to have some form of balance, some sort of wider exposure to different opinions. And in that way, I think social media can become much more of a marketplace. You look at what's happening in Taiwan right now. A few weeks ago, I was at Vanderbilt University at a conference there. And the first Minister of Digital Affairs from Taiwan was speaking there. And what they're doing there, in terms of making public assemblies, citizens' assemblies an option online and using AI to actually really facilitate citizens' voices. It's the future of democracy, I think. I'm far more optimistic than many would be around AI and social media. These are ways democracy can really be enabled, not undermined. And I say look at Tahrir Square in the Arab Spring to see the impact it can have. The third thing is anonymity. And I absolutely understand why some people have an anonymous account. But in my opinion, when I will shock you, but I have a few people that disagree with me, and they come after me quite a lot on social media as well. When someone attacks me on social media and they don't have a real name, I pay them no attention. If you're not willing to have a name and stand by your opinion, then I'm not going to listen to you. If you're going to own your opinion and have a name, then we can engage in a conversation, even if I think you're an idiot. And so I understand. I would be very uncomfortable with the government ever saying you have to have a digital ID or something to be able to use it, so we know who you are, so you have to own it. There are reasons why people have anonymous accounts, but I'm going to place far less value on them when they're attacking me.
But just to follow up there, you say the algorithms are controlling it, and we agree on that. Do you think the government then should regulate the platforms to say that they have to have a mix of views or something, or does that go against the freedom of speech of platforms to build their?
I don't accept that. I don't accept that platforms have free speech rights. That they have other rights as private actors, but they don't have speech rights. Speech rights are for individuals and for humans. I don't believe in well, no, I don't believe in robots having speech rights. It's a very good question. It's a very difficult question. I would either say yes, or at the very least, I would say social media platforms need to be very transparent. On this platform, you will be forced to hear from opinions of people you don't like, and I think a lot of people would actually enjoy that experience more. Or they're a private platform, and in a way, I think the government shouldn't be telling them how to run their business, but they have to disclose. You will be siloized into groups of people that think like you, even though they may not represent society at all. And actually, I guess, have user warnings as part of this. People can then make those decisions themselves. I'm a big fan of people being able to choose the level of disagreement. So on my Facebook, say I don't want to have to hear swearing. I'm going into a place I don't have. Just because you have a right to say it doesn't mean I have to listen to it. So I can shut myself away if I want, or I can say I don't care what anyone's saying. I want to see it all, and you can actually regulate that yourself. I don't think the government should do that. I think if individuals can have more autonomy over the experience that they have on social media, that would be positive. Ma'am on the row there. Yep.
Just about those drag queens. The drag queens in libraries are actually not transvestites or drag queens, they're paid actors. We had Let Kids Be Kids national speakers, the women who went around the whole of New Zealand.
I know Penny Marie well, yeah.
Yeah, so it was through their presentation here in Taupo, and that was one of the things. The drag queens are not drag queens, they're paid actors, and they're promoting an agenda. And this highlights what I'm really passionate about, and that is the safety of children in New Zealand, and more needs to be done to protect the children in New Zealand, all children.
I totally agree, absolutely. How do we protect? There wasn't a question there. I'll respond with a question. How do we protect children?
Well, you're a Christian, so you know that children that are brought up in godly homes and loved and embraced wholeheartedly by their parents. And scripture is quite clear. A child left to himself comes to no good. Children need to be supervised. They need to be cared for by their own parents. And if, like some children I know who don't have parents, are cared for by the grandparents. And I think the room's full of people. I'm a grandmother of many and a great-grandmother. And
Wonderful.
I see my generation need to wake up and do more for their children, the children in their family, the children in their neighbourhood,
Bravo.
the children. We have many, many opportunities in our communities for our age group to volunteer. We have to stop being so darn selfish and get out there and help the children.
So I'm just going to repeat what she hit there for those who didn't hear over here. She said, stop being so darn selfish. I quite agree. Ma'am, I entirely agree. I think you're absolutely right. And you haven't said anything there that is explicitly censorial at all. I would just encourage you to think about, I entirely agree, let's protect children, let's remain engaged, let's advocate for our values, but do we do that by shutting our opponents down, or do we do it by calling them out?
Calling them out.
Yeah.
Quite right, absolutely.
should we then allow drag queens in public places indoctrinate children? That's the question.
So what's the difference between indoctrinating and just communicating? You're superimposing your value statement there, I would suggest.
Okay. Most of us who, as friends said over here, Christians bringing up children, we do the educating in our home, not in the public school. So, do we not have rights to have public places protected from alternative?
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah, it's good.
You have the right to your opinions in your home, and when you step out into the public, you have the duty to engage with people who think differently to you.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
Should they not have their right to do it in their place?
They do have the right to do it in their home, and you know what? A great thing that I love, you get to go and stand on the corner and hand out Gideon Bibles. And that's and Paul Byrne gets to stand on the street and say $100 to anyone who can prove slavery is more evil than abortion. I don't think you and I like the idea that contentious or provocative ideas should be shut away in the homes. You and I don't benefit in the values that we hold from that. I'm going to always stand with the right for people to make their case. And you know what? These drag queens are sharing a gospel of inclusion that differs fundamentally from my worldview. And I am not threatened by that. I do not hate them for that. They are wrong, and I believe in truth. And I believe that together we can pursue truth. If we already all had truth, we wouldn't need free speech. But I promise you those drag queens have at least one thing to teach me. And I hope I can learn it from them as I engage with them in conversation.
Therefore, is the legislation from the government to ban game pictures in public?
Utter nonsense. We've been very proud to consistently oppose it. It is nothing but politicking. That is the very worst kind of legislative lawmaking. It really is. I don't think the government should tell us what to wear.
Mask either.
And the intellectual knots you have to end up tying yourself in. Now I'm not here to tell anyone what to think, least of all politically. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. It's a very hard decision to look at who the worst is in Parliament back then. But who the least worst is in Parliament back then. But David Seymour has been relatively consistent on free speech matters. But then he comes on the news a week or so ago and no, we shouldn't ban swastikas. I want to know who the idiots are in our societies. But we should ban gang patches because that's about intimidation. Because a barking dog is intimidating, but if someone walked in here with a swastika, none of us would mind, right? Utter nonsense. All this is, can I put it this way? All this is based populist politicking. With all due respect, the reason Mark Mitchell and Chris Luxon are doing it is because they think largely demographics like this want it. That's why they're doing it, because they think the older, traditionally more conservative vote think that if they lock up the gangs, they'll be rewarded for it. So I say refuse to reward parties that act so unprincipledly and think so lowly of your intelligence. In the corner, man. No, not at all. Democracy is the idea that individuals get to participate together. So, it is built on a heritage in the same way that if democracy is simply everyone having a vote and them having them say, it could become mob rule. But in the same way that free speech is not simply the right to have things say that are free, but actually it's a philosophical idea around dialogue and an exchange. Democracy, primarily birthed through the European Enlightenment, but obviously tracing its roots back to Greece, is the idea that individuals get to pursue the good of themselves and their community. And when we do that, we pursue that good with a view to why do we each get a vote? Because we are each fundamentally equal in human dignity. And so if we are fundamentally in human dignity, then we do not mob together to oppress minorities. Democracy is fundamentally majoritarian. It's about majority rule, of course, but not mob rule. Because a mob is a large group going after a small group or an individual. That's not democracy. That's not what we've inherited. What we've inherited is, in the classical sense, liberal values that believe in fundamental dignity and fundamental rights for all people, based on who they are as individuals, not as collectives. And so then as we stand in democracy, we vote for our own interests and we vote for the interests of our community with the dignity of minority groups and the vulnerable in mind as well. Do you disagree?
Oh, my concern is that you have majority rule and then minorities have to go along.
So who are the minorities?
Well, it is talk about vaccine mandates, you know, so, or councils deciding that, or referendums on anything really, you know, and then the laws are made based on referendums, and if you don't,
Yeah.
you voted against
You have to,
against it,
absolutely.
you go
So the 2 points I would make is with regards to mandates, that was denying the fundamental dignity of others to decide what goes in their own bodies and make personal medical choices for themselves. So that was mob rule. That's not connected to democracy though. That was connected to the authoritarianism that came to rise through the previous government. I would say though that with respect to your second point, what is the alternative that you would suggest? If it is not that a majority of people can pass legislation, inevitably we'll end up then with a minority of people getting to set the rules.
But the majority of people don't pass legislation. Democracy is you vote for the leaders. You vote for leaders who put out a manifesto.
That's more Republican. That's one of the reasons I'm very much opposed to republicanism. No, democracy is the idea of sending representatives in. Republics is the idea that you vote. So republics are built off the idea from Plato's Republic, that societies are best governed by senators, the erudite and landowning and smart in our country, that they make decisions on our behalf. But democracies are the idea that who's your local MP here, Louise Upston? That the idea is, and I'm not saying we're achieving that in New Zealand, but the idea of a democracy is that you select a representative to go and represent your voice.
But they have to put forward a manifesto.
Well, that's what we've come to more and more.
You don't decide their manifesto. The politicians put forward a manifesto.
So that's a corruption of
They be based on the feedback from us, which they think we want. But they still have to put forward. So it isn't mob rule in the sense that we get to say every law that's passed, and it's a mob that makes.
If the citizens are participating, then it is.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I've worked with a lot of politicians. They're all very aware of public sentiment because their job relies on it. And if we are all participating in the way that democracy calls us to, then we will find actually that our representatives go as a product of what we are wanting rather than telling us what we should want. And I think this is what I believe. And my generation has very much fallen into this, but I think we've inherited it from a previous generation. More and more in New Zealand, we've decided freedom's a rather bothersome thing, isn't it? Freedom's a very heavy burden to bear. I would rather actually give the state more responsibility, more power. Just keep me safe. Just keep me safe. I would actually rather not have the duties that come with democracy. I would rather not have the bother of having to remain engaged in public discourse. You take care of it. Just keep me safe.
So it's apathy, isn't it?
It's apathy. It's indifference. It's a product of having had it too good in many ways.
Yeah.
But Benjamin Franklin said that those who would give their freedom for a little safety will end up with will forfeit both and deserve neither. And that is where we're at now. We will not have safety, and we'll have given our freedom as a result. And I was in a meeting with the police commissioner several months ago when the training issue came up. And he said, you might be making a few fair points, but you can watch your tone. I would have appreciated if you just watched the way you talk about it. And I said, Commissioner, we currently have 3 cases before the courts of wrongful arrest. You have your officers stop arresting people for basic speech rights, and then we'll check our tone. But right now, the way that we mobilise and we put public pressure is the only way that we have to ensure accountability and transparency. And he and I were exchanging a series of letters, and he said it is the duty of police to make New Zealand the safest country in the world. And I said, no, Commissioner. That does not exist anywhere in our laws. It is the duty of police to enforce the law. And right now what you're doing is training officers to pursue hate crime when hate crime does not exist anywhere in our legislation. And what we see are these allegedly good ideas, these virtuous intentions, safety, who could disagree with it? Kindness, who's arguing against it? These get perverted into very cruel things when we are not connected to the principles that have led us to the peace, prosperity and stability that we know in this country. And so look, democracy is far from a perfect system. I'm not sure of anyone that works better though.
Thank you.
Sir? Yeah.
Yeah, probably on a slightly different topic, but a few weeks ago I listened to an interview with Sean Plunkett and the president of the Victoria University students.
Michael Parkins.
Yeah, about the deplatforming of yourself or free speech.
Attempted deplatforming. Don't give them that much credit.
On the debate on free speech,
Yeah.
and one of the arguments that she put forward as to why they didn't want the Free Speech Union there was because the Free Speech Union presented arguments that were not researched and didn't meet their standard of research.
These are the people that tell you chicks can have dicks and that rocks have life forces. So I'm not going to be lectured by them on evidence. Providing examples. But examples are simply a patriarchal heteronormative structure that oppresses the underclass.
What is your sort of counter to that, rather than
Look, please.
There's a certain guy a few years ago who was very well researched and knowledgeable and had a university education. In fact, he had 2 PhDs, one in
if you're referring to Don Brash,
no, not at all. He had a PhD in medicine and another one in anthropology, and his name was Dr. Mengele. So there's an example of how bad that can go.
I feel no need to counter arguments like that when they can't come up with an example.
No,
I think it's a self-defeating argument.
If it got presented to me, sort of thing, I don't know, does the Free Speech Union really just come up with ideas and spout them out, or is it based on, it's sort of evident to me now that it's based on some research, but, you know, I guess he was trying to talk about, is there empirical research?
Yeah. What would your impression be of tonight? Are we just spouting hot air?
No.
Yeah. Look, it's a very fair question. I mean, I just think Mark Twain said, "Don't wrestle with a pig. You know, they'll draw you into the mud and then beat you with good experience." And with some of these people, you know, they have their right to free speech. I'm not going to try and suppress that, but I'm also going to try and be a little bit more strategic and discerning than thinking every person I engage with is a good faith argument that reason will beat. Unfortunately, there are many bad faith operatives out there, and engaging them often is a fool's errand. And Michael Parkinson, I don't think, actually has evidence or reason on her side. She's talking from talking points of her ideological perspective, and going and speaking at that event and contributing reasonably and calmly at the free speech panel there was the biggest retort I think I could make to her perspective.
Just talking about perhaps future Free Speech Union campaigns, would you see the Free Speech Union campaigning to ask schools to have alternative narratives in their teaching?
Schools don't have free speech rights.
But they are also indoctrinating the kids.
No, they are presenting their perspective, and you consider that indoctrination. And we live in a capitalist society, and Soviet Russia hates the fact that we teach kids that free markets might be a good idea. So indoctrination is a matter of perspective. You have the right, as an individual, and I imagine as a father, to put your children in public school, to put them in private school, to put them in semi-attached, to put them into homeschool. You're going to soon have options to put them in charter schools. I think that's a wonderful development. I hear where you're coming from. I personally hold probably some of the concerns that you do. It's not so much a free speech question though, because it is the role of public education to decide the curriculum that they want to present. My encouragement to you, rather than trying to say that, well, this is the perspective you present, you have to present the other perspective as well. That, you know, we believe the earth is round, we don't say they have to present the earth is flat as well. We accept that some things are fact, and you're welcome to try and challenge it. We're not going to try and shut you down, but we don't have to teach our kids that either. What I would suggest a better approach is join the Board of Trustees. Go talk to your PTA, your Parent Teachers Association. Be part of that conversation. And rather than saying, well, you've got one set of facts there, I don't like this, present the other set of facts, help through questions and dialogue draw out why they think the curriculum that they currently have is the appropriate one, and whether, if you think it's unbalanced, again, I probably share some of your concerns, whether there's a more balanced way to pursue that. What's your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, it's too late for us. But it's certainly, when we've approached the school about it post issue, it's actually, they are completely closed-minded and purely following a particular narrative. And if we were able to just get them to acknowledge that there might be alternatives that are allowed to talk in schools, we might actually save ourselves some more angst in the future.
Yeah. Look, this is what Rudi Dietzsch, a radical Marxist of the 1970s from Germany, what he called the Long March to the Institution. And that's exactly what they've done. It's not a conspiracy theory. They told us that's what they were going to do. They did it, and we didn't listen. And the only alternative, the only solution, it's not an authoritarian one. It's not a matter of coming up with a new constitution or anything like that. The only alternative is to try and turn around and walk back through the institutions and take some seats at those tables and invite them and persuade them to have more reasoned conversations. And so, how many people here are members of a political party? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a shame. Because if you're not a member of a political party, you don't get to contribute to the policies and the manifesto that they have. You don't get to help them select candidates. So you get to vote every 3 years, but democracy is supposed to be so much more than that. How many of you are part of a church community or Lions or Rotary, something like that? Maybe a bit more, but the weakness of our civil society is at the heart of why we are facing so much of the demise that we are. And I think, I don't mean to call you out, sir, but I wish, my wife is a district councillor, 29-year-old, we run a business, I travel probably 100 nights a year. We didn't need to find something else to fill up her time with, 2 kids, but we said, if we don't do this, who else will? And we need people to stand up. The government elections are coming up next year. I hope these guys run again, and I hope there's a whole lot of people running alongside them. Not against them, but running alongside them. We need better choices around our council table. We need more open conversations there. Think about running for your board of trustees. Think about running for your local government. Join a political party. We need people to participate.
Can I just back you up on that?
Of course, I'm always looking for someone to back me up.
I've stood in 3 elections now, and I learned more about the political process doing that. Of course. Than watching, so I can only say, please stand.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Is it not also important to attend politician surgeries as well and express your opinion?
Absolutely.
I mean, you don't have to actually become a political
of course.
member, but I'm of opinion.
No,
That's what we fight all the time, is an apathy. We had a public consultation at Turing a few months ago, and there were 10 staff and 2 local people turned up. What do you do?
You don't have to.
It was a public meeting, that's what it was.
Well, there haven't been any council political meetings in Taupo that I'm aware of.
You don't have to join a political party. You do have to join the Free Speech Union. Thank you for coming tonight.